good morning and a warm welcome to all of you to this edition of Expert Speak. Today, we are talking about reviving the Indian economy in what we are calling the COVID-19 era. And to talk about this very important and core subject, welcome Mr. Bipul Chatterjee. He is the Executive Director of CUTS International. Welcome, Bipulda. It's a pleasure to have you in this edition of Expert Speak.
Thank you, Sabia. Indeed, it is a pleasure to talk to you on a subject which is very important for all of us, not just for our economy, but for us, the people of the country.
Thank you. Just a few words about Mr. Chatterjee. Mr. Chatterjee is the Executive Director of CUTS International, which is a global public policy think and action tank on trade, regulations, and governance. Portfolio of work in various areas. Prior to joining CUTS in 1997, he has worked in several national institutions, such as in New Delhi in the field of economics, such as the National Council for Applied Economic Research, the Institute of Economic Growth. He's authored several articles, papers, and books in the field of international trade and related subjects. Bipulda, before I ask you the first question, we are well into the pandemic now, and there has been some experience gained, unlike the very initial days when we really didn't know what's happening. There are also learnings from across the globe. Many countries have flattened out their curves. And in the West. And in India, we are, of course, still grappling, being such a populous country. What is your assessment of the general economic situation that has arisen out of this and the post-COVID measures that have been undertaken and the economic interventions that have been made since the pandemic broke out? If you can start with giving us a general view of how you see India and the economy in the context of what's happening overall in the whole globe and of course in India and South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabia. Indeed, during this COVID era, we can't really start talking about post-COVID era. In case of India, the 19 pandemic, I think it started sometime in the beginning of March, right? If we look at the state of the Indian economy in the last financial year, which is 2019-2020, you see the Indian economy was already undergoing a number of stresses, and that got reflected in our growth rates of all quarters of the last financial year. We just got the data from the government sources about the growth of the Indian economy during the last financial year as a whole, which was about 3.8%. And it was about 4.2%, and that of the last quarter of last, which was from January to March, it was about 3.8%. Now, you see, we have to understand this in the context of the structure of our economy. The interesting point is that I'll focus on the last quarter of the last financial year, January to March. You see, in the month of March, we are already started slowdown of the economic activities per se, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are several indicators to support this point. I'll come back to those some of those indicators. But the interesting point is that during last financial year, our agriculture has shown a lot of growth as compared to what it used to be in the recent past. Our agriculture has grown by about 6%, which is after a number of years, we have that much of growth in our agriculture. So the current as well as the future of the Indian economy is to be looked at in that context. Our manufacturing and our services, I mean, they are three major components of any country's economy. They have not grown that much during the last quarter. Particularly, the services sector was hugely hit as a result of lockdown. Another option, I would refer to, given the COVID-19 pandemic, which has already spread in large parts of the world. By the time we had taken that action, we had no other option. I would refer to a very interesting study, and there are a number of studies which are going around. Some of them are good, some of them are not good, I mean, which is natural. I would refer to a study which was done by a group of biostatisticians in the University of Michigan. Incidentally, that group is led by an Indian biostatistician. Her name is Professor Bhamar Mukherjee. And I have looked at that data very, very carefully and found that since then, the COVID graph, which we have seen so far in the country, is more or less matching with the forecast that she and her group had made at that point of time. And it depends on a very number of measures, not just lockdown per se, but many other measures like social distancing and things like that. Economy. I think within a few days of announcing the lockdown, our government has made a set of announcements, taken a set of measures. Remember that this is a supply side shock, right? Primarily, it is a supply side shock. Now it can spill over to the demand side. I mean, there is every possibility of spilling it over to the demand side, but we have to arrest that. So the first set of measures arrest that. Then the Reserve Bank of India came up with a number of measures over a period of time, which primarily they were to sustain the supply side of the economy. Right? And then on 2nd of May, our Prime Minister, he announced a package which is called Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is about 21 lakh crore of rupees, which is again, which was announced by our finance minister over a period of time, that it's all about boosting the supply side of the economy. So here is a case where the supply has stopped suddenly for reasons which are not under our control fully. Now we have to first boost supply or get that supply back so that we don't face with sudden surge in demand without much of supply, which will result in inflation, and who are going to suffer most? It's the poor people of our country. They are going to suffer most as a result of such sudden surge in inflation. Now here also, this is a macro picture, you see, and we have to go into the details. I'll tell you only a couple of data that even during this period of lockdown, our agriculture didn't suffer that much. Our agricultural activities. There was a peak harvest time for wheat. Cotton was also harvested earlier. They are also getting into the market. So in the last season, Rabi season, not only that our wheat production was at a record high, its procurement was also at a record high. So we need to make a note of that point. So was our cotton production and cotton procurement, rabi crops that we have. So I think the interventions, they have come at the right time, and we are going to see the results of those interventions as we open up. So as we open up in a calibrated manner, which we are doing, uh, we are going to see the supply back, and then the demand is also going to come back into the market. Of course, it's not going to come back fully. The another indicator of the opening up of the Indian economy is that on 20th May this year, the amount of petroleum products that we consumed was 65% of the amount of petroleum product which we consumed on 20th May 2019. So that's another indicator of the economy coming back into its straddle. Another indicator I would cite is the CMI data, Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy. In April, they estimated that 122 million Indian workers, they lost their jobs as a result of lockdown and such things. Now, out of those, in May, earlier this month, 20 million has come back to work. Now, the point here is, in earlier this month, the lockdown was in full force, more or less. Even then, as the government advised that in Indian economy of our economic activities, people are coming back to work. So in the month of June, I'm sure a much more number of people who are going to come back to work. And once they come back, they are going to get income and they are going to generate demand. And by that time, the supply side, also supply will also start. All these measures taken together, and there are also reform measures which I'll come later, they are, in a sense, underlining the fact that supply is going to create its own demand. And I think that is what is going to happen to the Indian economy in this financial and in the few years to come from now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. A related question, because you so rightly spoke about the supply side, which has been stressed, is the issue that, we, in spite of the numbers, there's a large population, such as the migrant laborers, who are really not, I don't know if they're properly gauged into the system as such now. As this, do you think there is a need now to spend directly on such a population in the supply side? And how can this be calibrated with the demand side measures?
Of course, first of all, we need to understand that why they had to migrate out, because there are no jobs in their places, right? And so the only alternate was kind of odd jobs under Manrega and schemes like that. So they had migrated out in the first place. And many of them, by the way, they are also in various other cities for a longer period of time. Now, you are right in saying that this is time for taking specific steps for their betterment, betterment of life. And I am sure that the government is going to take such steps. Government has already started taking process. I'm talking about central government and several other state governments, particularly the state government of Uttar Pradesh, which are very much in the news. Now you see that there is one act which was passed by the Indian Parliament, this Interstate Migrant Workmen Act in 1979. Now nobody has implemented it. So that's a very, very serious concern of our polity as a whole. Now, central government has started reviving it with necessary amendments. And here I am happy to say that as part of our work of our organization, CUTS International, we have been continuously providing inputs to various bodies, including to the chairperson of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Labour, not just for the revival of the act, of this act, particular act, but also for the overall welfare of Indian workers, both in the formal sector as well as in the informal sector. We are also going to advocate for a universal social security net for India, mitigate much of the miseries that our brothers and sisters they have faced during this period of time. You see, this is a crisis situation, and while we have to take measures to mitigate their miseries, we have to also take this crisis as an opportunity to make things better, as against just criticizing government bodies and others that about not doing things. It's not that the government is not doing things. Government is also taking several measures, both central government as well as a number of state governments, more or less all of them. Uh, but together we have to face this challenge, and we have to come out with a set of solutions which are going to help our own people. And remember, you see that these are all anecdotal evidence. Uh, I think when they go back, I think their income is going to go up. And we are seeing the number of anecdotal stories coming out from various states. Uh, the alternate is to get them employment in their own states. I mean, it's going to take time. And Uttar Pradesh government has started taking a number of measures in that regard. I think only yesterday with an industrial association for creating 7.5 lakh jobs per year for the natives of I think we have to take a number of calibrated measures for not just for migrant workers, for all workers of our both informal as well as formal sector workers for our countries, particularly income, and that can be done. It's possible that it can be done provided our economy. There are other factors which impact our competitiveness, and we do reforms in those factors of productions, particularly in case of land, in case of capital, and in case of logistics. So if we can do that, the good thing is that reforms in all these input sides of the market that they have started taking place, and I'm sure that they are going to gain momentum over a period of time.
Thank you. It seems like it's a very delicate balancing act, because on one side, uh, the supply side needs to be boosted, and but there is also we are still not having a vaccine for corona yet, and the health aspects are a matter of concern, because uh, more you open up and more activity, economic activity, unless the proper protocols are there for safeguarding the health aspect, uh, it seems to be a challenge to even implement these policies. A quick comment on that before I request a quick comment on what I just said before we move on to the next question.
You see, you are right in saying that you have to balance, but balance between what? I mean, there are two major uh, things which you have to take into account: economic well-being as well as COVID curve. I mean, there are a number of curves. See, ultimately, it's going to be like a normal distribution,
Yes.
right? I mean, the number of cases per day. I'm not talking about total number of cases. Number of cases, total number of cases will get flattened. I mean, ultimately, it has to be an asymptotic curve. But what kind of normal distribution that we are going to see in future? That's the question.
Mm.
I think when we faced with this pandemic, if I look at our health infrastructure, whether it's hospital beds or personal protection equipments and things like that, our capacity to test, all of them were not that good. But at that point of time, if we had to have seen this kind of surge, then there would have been a complete collapse of our health infrastructure. So we have delayed it. I don't know whether we have already reached the peak or not. I'm not a health professional. So, but I was hearing the director of All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Dr. Guleria. According to him, in the month of July, in a particular day. Therefore, we have to take a number of precautionary measures. We have to have hospital beds, PPEs for health professionals and other professionals who are directly involved in fighting COVID. The good thing is that we are much more prepared than today than what it used to be in the middle of March. So we are fully prepared to face this menace, and I think over a period we may see a second surge as well, second wave, and I think our immunity to resist such things are also going to get developed over time. But all these things take time. But at the same time, we have to also keep our economy going. So we have to balance between the economic well-being of our people as well as healthy well-being. Of course, there are some loopholes, some aberrations, some hitches here and there. But overall, I think we are facing this pandemic uh, in a good manner.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, Moving forward, as this as we start spending more, recovering, trying to recover, what do you see is the if I may call it the ladder to recovery? What is the lowest or the lower rungs? What are the sectors which are the lower rungs which can be focused on? I mean, I'm sure agriculture would be one of them, but others, maybe you can tell us a few of them which
You see, those
worth
sectors,
mentioning.
those sectors which have strong links with essential commodities, essential products, whether agriculture or non-agriculture. I think they are going to come back much more quickly than other sectors. For example, hotels, restaurants, hospitality sector, they are going to take a little longer time. Tourism is going to take much longer time. Yeah. But as I said, those sectors which are producing day-to-day products for day-to-day consumption, they are going to come back much more quickly. In Jaipur, we didn't face any and other items. Prices have not gone up; they are more or less stable, and also therefore I must thank those who are not just at the top level, at the central government and at the top level, but also at the state government level, then at the various other level, logistics sector. I think that has done an excellent job for the supply of essential commodities, barring one or two cases. we didn't see any news item, even in popular media, about non-availability of essential commodities in the country, even in Northeast India, mind you. So, so that's a great job done by our logistics sector.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we need to not. It has been a very, very uphill task, and I think we've done well so far. Um,
At a considerable risk to the life of those people,
absolutely, absolutely.
those who are engaged with this.
Yes.
Indian Post, for example,
Yes.
Indian Railways,
Yes.
and also a number of private sector players. We must thank them.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's brought out the best of so many. Yes.
True.
Yes. On a different note, we move on to a macro view again. There is expected to be the reconfiguration of global value chains. Uh, it seems to be not going to be business as usual. The value chains are being reconfigured as we speak. There is a demand for localization, and then we have an evolving geopolitical you see the role of organizations such as the WTO and other relevant multilateral bodies evolving um, to take this forward.
So I'll come to the WTO later.
Hmm.
You see, one thing which we have to remember is countries do not do trade. I mean, primarily, it's the private sector which they do trade. Now, you are right in saying that this reconfiguration of value chains which are going on, it's not true that it's just an after effect of COVID. It has been going on for quite some time. See. And this cry for local, vocal for local, this is also going on for quite some time. In fact, if I look at the data, all three major indicators of globalization, which is cross-border trade, cross-border investment, and cross-border migration, including temporary migration, they are at their peak for 2 decades, in 1990s and the decade of noughts, this millennium. After the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, they started tapering off. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic is going to accelerate that. So we are already seeing one kind of, before the COVID-19 pandemic, we are already seeing deglobalization, right? And COVID-19 is going to accelerate that. But we need to see how we're going to define globalization. That's also very important for this to understand fully. What was likely to happen over a period of 20 years, I think it's likely to happen, let's say, over a period of 5 years. So that's the momentum which we are talking about. And in terms of reconfiguration of global value chains, I think it is going to depend. Global value chains are going to be there, or value chains are going to be there. They have to be there. It's a given. You can't produce everything in a factory anymore. But lot of reconfiguration is going to take place. Already we are seeing that there are many large number of companies which are planning to shift their base from China to various other countries. It will depend on how competitive you are, not just in respect to labor cost and things like that, but how competitive you are. Uh, what is your productivity? Taking all factors of production into account. Here in this context, let me say that India is doing fairly well, I mean, overall, in terms of total factor productivity and its growth. Now, total factor productivity measures the contribution of other factors of production other than labor and capital in your productivity. Factors like logistics, leadership, things like that. And over the last several years, our total factor productivity growth is in the range of 2 to 3%, which is quite good. Incidentally, in case of China, since 2012, their total factor productivity growth is negative. It's a negative trend. So we are in an advantageous position. And if I look at our overall labor productivity in particular, productivity of Indian labor in sectors like textiles, in electronics, they are quite high, even as compared to China, even as compared to Vietnam. So we are going to see a number of reconfiguration of manufacturing as a whole, I would say, not just value chains, over a period of time. And I think COVID-19 is going to accelerate that. And therefore, it will be good for the Indian economy, provided we set our own house in order. We need to do a lot of reforms. It's not just about ease of doing business. I'm not. I don't want to go into the details of the methodology of preparing that index, which is not that robust in my opinion. It's more about ease of running business on the ground. You see, you may have a nice policy, a very good policy, but what about its implementation? So it's the policy implementation which is a bane of our country, not just at the central level, but at the state level, and more importantly, at the local level. So we have to work in tandem with each other in calibrated manner in order to attract business. And I'm happy to say that a number of state governments have started taking measures uh, in various respects in order to reduce the cost of doing business. And cost of doing business on the ground can be reduced if and only if we can have reforms on the input side of the market. Therefore, we have these 44 labor laws which are being now consolidated into 4 labor codes. We are not talking about dilution of India's labor laws or India's commitments to the International Labour Organization and things like that. We are simplifying those laws so that there can be workers' well-being as well as enterprise well-being. There is absolutely no conflict between, there should not be any conflict between the two. Both well-being can be increased, provided we have the right laws, regulations, policies in place, and more importantly, they are implemented with the right intention. The job of implementing authorities is to facilitate those regulations, facilitating the implementation of those regulations, not to control them. So you have to get out of this controlled mindset to the facilitation mindset. And that has already started happening in a number of states. So I'm very hopeful on that point. Now, coming back to your question on WTO, role of WTO and such major, what WTO can do is to see that countries are sticking to their commitments. When you look at the WTO agreements, the agreements are there, then countries have made commitments to various provisions of those agreements. Of course, there are extensions and exceptions. Yeah. So role of the WTO is to see that countries are sticking to their commitments. They are not imposing unnecessary export restrictions, for example, not imposing unnecessary import restrictions, for example. And that is the role that we see. About other international organizations like the UN bodies, their primary role is to generate knowledge, and in this case, new knowledge about how to get our economies back on track, how to collaborate, how to coordinate with each other. And I think they're doing a fairly good job in that respect. CUTS is involved with one such initiative, which is spearheaded by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, which is looking at various trade related provisions in trade agreements and see that how trade can be used in a much more proactive manner, or trade rules can be used in a much more proactive manner in order to address crises and pandemic situations like this. So on behalf of CUTS International, I am working with a number of experts from all over the world to come out with a set of perhaps revised provisions on a number of issues ranging from essential goods to trade facilitation to for preparing the world in a better manner in order to face such crisis in the future.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's very useful, what you said, and which brings me to my last question, which is a nearer home, which is about multilateral cooperation in Eastern South Asia, we can say. Uh, it has it has always been CUTS has been very active. I know on trade facilitation, BBIN, Asian Conference, as you know, has been working on this. Um, how do you see the role of ongoing connectivity projects? And we'll confine it to Eastern South Asia, uh, India's eastern front. Uh, we can say the SASIC region, maybe. How do you see the role of multilateral cooperation in uh, bringing sort of a win-win situation for all the economies of the member nations to take things forward, especially in light of the challenges posed by COVID? I mean, it was always an issue. I mean, that region always needed that, but I think COVID-19 has brought out an urgency in multilateral cooperation. So I guess my question is, on one side, there is the importance of multilateral cooperation. On the other side, there is the demand for localization. There is also the issues of how do we treat our borders, because borders now is not just security, but it's also about health security, related to COVID. So these apparent contradictions, but they also may hold the key to a new paradigm of engagement. And I'd like to hear your views on this.
I'm glad that you use this term Eastern South Asia. Though some people have started talking about SARC 2.0, I think that time is yet to come. It may come, rather it should come. But that time is yet to come. Despite our best of our efforts, what we are seeing is also bilateral cooperation as a result of those efforts. They should continue, and I know that they are going to continue. Now, I'll give you one example to underline the points that you are making. The importance of connectivity. Borders are not just about traditional security. Borders are also evolving in respect to health security. So you know that there are a large number of border posts, land custom stations, we call them, in the India-Bangladesh border. Of course, with other land borders as well, India, Nepal, India, Bhutan. Now I'm taking this example of India-Bangladesh because these are the two largest economies in Eastern South Asia. Uh, and the trade is quite high. uh, between these two countries. When you look at the size of the Bangladesh economy, in that context in particular, now all and more than 90% of their trade used to happen through land borders. You know it. Now, as a result of COVID, all land borders are closed for passenger movement as well as for goods movement. Now, is it that our trade with Bangladesh has stopped? No. The answer is no. Particularly India's exports to Bangladesh, because Bangladesh depends on India for a large number of essential commodities. They are going on through railways. You look at the number of wagons which are going via the Gede-Darsana route every day. They are going on via railways. They are going on via waterways, yeah, through coastal shipping. So Indian ships are going to Chittagong port, to Mangla port. From there, they are also being shipped. And many of our Indian products, which are meant for Northeast, they are also going via waterways. So the important point is about connectivity. And I think SASEC can play a major role in this. The SASEC group, South Asian Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation, which consists of 6 or 7 countries, all these countries which you have mentioned, plus Sri Lanka, plus Maldives, and I think Myanmar is also now part of the SASEC group, which is led by this group is led by the Asian Development Bank.
Yes.
They already have their plan for improved transport linkages between and among these countries. And the good thing about this group, ADB's work in particular, and also the other multilateral agencies, including bilateral agencies like JICA, the Japan International Cooperation Agencies, World Bank, now Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, they are also investing. A number of connectivity initiatives which are going on. The good thing is that it's not that every country has to come together in order to take up an initiative. If two countries are ready and willing to go ahead with a particular project, then that project can be done. And we know that there are a number of such projects which are being done between these countries. So I think while multilateral cooperation is very, very important, multilateral cooperation may be at the top level in order to have better understanding of the value of cooperation, the value of connectivity and things like that. When it comes to operational level, it can be bilateral, it can be trilateral, it can be quadrilateral. So all options are there. And I'm glad to say that all these countries are availing all such options. So we're going to see a number of, we are already seeing the virtues of connectivity, particularly during this stressful time. And we're going to see a number of new connectivity initiatives, including the revival of old linkages, which are on the cards. You know that you are from Shillong, you are from Northeast, you understand the importance of connectivity. You see, before independence in 1947 or immediately after independence, Shillong was the, in terms of per capita income, the wealthiest city in the country. The per capita income of Shillong was more than that of Mumbai or Calcutta, right? It's because of connectivity, it's because of business. Now, due to partition and this artificial creation of borders, so as to say, and more importantly, closing of border after 1965, this connectivity, these connections, they are gone. So now you see that if we can revive the old railway link between Chittagong and Dibrugarh, and then link that with the railway network, linking all capitals of northeastern states, then it is going to do wonderful things for the Northeast India as a whole. Then there are other initiatives also, other connectivity initiatives like border huts. You know it very well. People are able to access goods which they are otherwise either they are not able to access them or they are paying hugely in terms of time as well as cost. We have visited Balad border hut, for example, in Meghalaya, Bangladesh border. And we have seen that there is a large demand for water purifiers, for example. Now, if they want to have access to water purifiers, earlier they had to go to Shillong, and that takes 12 hours a day, going, spending some time there, coming back, time and money, both. And remember that time is also money. Now, those products are available in those places, and people are accessing them. So, these kind of connectivity, including people-to-people connectivity, they are very important for 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 developing trust
Yes.
among the people of these countries. We are together, I mean, just about 70 odd years ago. Now you have to rebuild this trust, and that rebuilding process has started. You see the kind of road infrastructure development which are taking place in Northeast India. All these connectivity initiatives, they are very important, not just for doing business, but also for people-to-people connectivity, for building trust among people. And then the people on the ground, these are all ground level initiatives. They are going to realize the values of cooperation. And a positive narrative is going to emerge out of it. So Border Hut is a wonderful example of people-to-people connectivity, not just about doing business. And you know it very well that our border security forces, both Indian BSF and Border Guard Bangladesh, they are very happy because informal trade has come down, crime rates have come down. Yeah. Their life has become much better as a result of border huts. So, Government of India and Government of Bangladesh, they have identified a number of other places, 15 to begin with, border huts are going to come up in India-Bangladesh border in northeast covering Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. And there are also, through our work, we have identified more than 60 places along the India-Bangladesh border in West Bengal, on the West Bengal side, where border huts can come up. And people are demanding them. You know, I was reading in today's paper that within the next 3-4 months, waterway trade is going to start between Tripura and Bangladesh.
Yeah.
That's a great development. So there are alternate means of connectivity. Business is going to grow. People are going to there will be better livelihood options for people, opportunities for people. So their income is going to grow. Therefore, the demand is going to grow. And who is going to meet that demand? Through various suppliers, not just from India, but also from Bangladesh.
One last point. You know that, you have been at CUTS, you've been a great champion of regional connectivity. As a think tank headquartered in the Northeast, Asian Confluence, as you know, has been also very active in this connectivity discourse. And I've been happy to be working with CUTS on one of your projects on border huts. We have advocated that border huts needs to be improved in number and upscaled in its quality, so that they really grow. The paradigm has really been a successful one. Which brings me to the point that something like this pandemic, it is an opportunity for us to see a new normal if you see a macro view of the world, it is a great opportunity for the SASEC region to come together maybe on various other issues. Agriculture, health maybe are some core areas that could be highlighted. But we also need proper protocols and proper ways of working in which the safety of such contacts is also maintained, because we have to not, we have to remember that this pandemic started in a certain part of the world, and it is because of the fluidity of movement in the world of today, which enables easy travel and easy mingling, that it has spread. So we are balancing with two forces at work. Both are a reality, and both are there today. We do need regional connectivity, more cooperation amongst countries for the economy to grow, for overall well-being, overall security, peace. At the same time, we need protocols in place. For example, and that brings me to my last question, because I know that Kutz has been working on borders, and at Asian conference, this has also been a very, very important area of our focus. And how do you see better protocols of movement of goods and people, to keeping in the health aspects in mind? Health as a fundamental to basic human security.
There are a number of ways which this can be done, and it has already started happening in various parts of the world. So all we need to do is to see that how other regions are addressing it. I know for sure that in East Africa, there is this body Trademark East Africa, which is essentially is a program for trade facilitation among the East African countries, including countries in Horn of Africa. They're also expanding to Democratic Republic of Congo and Southern Sudan. So they have already developed a protocol and tested them on the set of protocols and tested them on the ground. So for safe trade, safe cross-border trade. So we need to look at that very, very carefully and see how we can adapt and adopt that measures, those set of measures in our part of the world. So the important point is that we don't have to start from the scratch. Already good examples are there, good practices are there. I strongly believe that for every problem that we face, there is a solution somewhere in the world. And this is how by the way, this is how Singapore has developed over a period of time. And therefore they can address their problems in a much quicker and faster manner. So you have to look for those solutions from around the world, understand them, get them into our part of the world, get them adapted. One possible solutions which we have been talking about for some time now, and I hope is going to happen very soon, is off-border clearance of goods. So you don't have to check goods at the border for cross-border trade of goods, not for passengers. So you have this inland container depots in India, what is called ICDs. In other countries also, our bordering countries, they have their ICDs. So a container of, let's say, Indian goods, all customs clearance and things like that can be done in ICD. Let's say in Durgapur, in West Bengal, there is an ICD. And then the container is sealed, and you can do electronic sealing. Electronic cargo tracking system is already in place in our country. And that container goes via, say, whatever border, Petrapol border, Gujarat border, whatever border. And then it goes straight to one, let's say, Kamalapur ICD in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, or whatever ICD. And then there they do the clearance. All insurance, everything is paid. So you don't have to check anything. Of course, there are a number of vested interests you have to deal with. Yeah. The menace of speed money, for example. Uh, so that's the political economy of the subject. In the large number of people who are otherwise employed in border trade. You know, in Petrapol-Benapol border, which is the largest land border in Asia, a large number of people are employed there for clearing goods, clearing agents, their employees, then for transshipment, loading, unloading. We have to think about alternate employment for them. So we have to balance them. So one thing which we missed out in we are going to see a new, as you said, new normal, new form of globalization, which you have already started seeing. And in the earlier phase of globalization is not new, as you know. It's been happening for centuries. It's not that we are witnessing globalization since early 1990s. Right now, we are witnessing the fourth phase of globalization, and very soon, and COVID-19 is going to accelerate that. I think we may see a fifth phase of globalization, but that is not incompatible with vocal for local. It's not that they are, as I said earlier, workers' well-being and enterprise well-being, they are not incompatible with each other. Both can be increased. And then vocal for local and globalization, they are also not incompatible. And the linkage is through value chains. So we are going to see that, COVID-19 is going to accelerate that, And we are going to see a new form of globalization, and local players are going to play a much, much bigger role in that new form of globalization.
Yeah, indeed, as you so well put it, I think COVID-19 era, which we are in, and is a time also to reflect and also to think out of the box for new paradigms and revive some old paradigms and it's just given an urgency to the task which was always there, but I think it's a great time to use this opportunity, though it's a challenge, but we can see some opportunity in this challenge to come out with some out of the box thinking to expedite this dream of a better future, what we all always thought of. On that note, Bipulda, I just want to thank you so much for coming. You wanted to add something?
Yeah. On this last point, you are absolutely right. See, and we can do it provided we introspect.
Absolutely.
And we have to introspect from all possible angles in a 360-degree manner.
Yes.
We have to learn. We have to unlearn.
Yes.
That is much more important than learning. And then we have to relearn.
Yes.
And I have much faith on our Indian philosophers and Indian thinkers.
Yes.
And this is there for centuries. You have to look into them much, much more carefully in order to create an enabling environment for human-centric globalization.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that's going to happen. And
Absolutely.
we're going to see that over the next couple of decades.
Absolutely. And that's perhaps think tanks like CUTS and Asian Conference should work together to see areas where we can deep dive into the wisdom that we already have in this country from the great masters, and see how they apply this timeless wisdom and these principles apply to the challenges that we face today. On that note, Vipulda, thank you so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to further engaging with you and your organization. And on behalf of my team at Asian Confluence, thank you so much for joining this edition of Expert Speak.
Thank you so much. It's indeed my pleasure to talk to you. We know each other for a long time. We used to meet quite regularly in various meetings and other places. We look forward to work together,
Yes,
particularly in Northeast India and adjoining countries.
absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.